The UK is wilder than you may think.
Just 3% of this land has been built upon, and so there are plenty of world-class wild spaces and incredible wildlife. I'm Colin Stafford-Johnson.
And I'm Lucy Cooke, and every day we're going to be discovering the top wilderness spots in the UK and revealing just how wild our islands are. We'll be travelling from rivers to mountains, from forests to seas, and even to some of our wildest cities, celebrating the incredible range of wildlife that lives and thrives amongst our precious wild places.
We'll also be going behind the scenes with Steve Backshall and the Wild Alaska Live team, covering all the wildlife action triggered by the annual arrival of millions of Pacific salmon to this vast wilderness. As a wildlife cameraman, I've been fortunate enough to have travelled the world, but the wild landscapes and wildlife of these islands have a special place in my heart and are full of the most inspirational wildlife stories.
And I've been passionate about protecting wildlife all my life, so I'm going to be joining the conservation frontline here in the UK to learn about how we keep our wildernesses wild and allow our wildlife to thrive.
This is your daily dose of the very best the UK has to offer. This is Wild UK.
The UK has a wealth of wild places to choose from, but we're kicking off today with a look at the rich world of rivers and waterways.
And you can really sense the raw power of water in places like this. It's actually scoured out the very hole we're standing in over time, but at the same time it has almost a sort of hypnotic, benign quality to it.
And of course, there's such a crucial lifeline for a wide range of wildlife. This is the River Wye in Scotland, and you might be lucky to spot otters or kingfishers or salmon here, and that's true of waterways all across the country.
Later I'll be finding out how important the River Wye is for wild salmon returning to the UK to breed.
What always amazes me is the fact that they have such energy left at the end of their long journey.
We'll also be joined by some familiar faces sharing their best past experiences of the wildlife that relies on our rivers and waterways and the conservation success stories that have helped them.
Oh, I can see it, it's there. That is incredible.
And I'll be discovering the wild side of Britain's canals.
Oh, how fantastic! I love kingfishers.
But first up, time for a snapshot of our rivers and waterways right across the UK in 2017.
The River Severn is the UK's largest river, snaking its way almost 220 miles, 352 kilometres, from its source in the Welsh Hills. In its lower reaches, it has one of the world's largest tidal ranges at 15 metres, creating the spectacular Severn Bore. Where our major rivers empty into the sea, amazing wild estuaries are created. The UK has over 90 estuaries and is home to over a quarter of all the estuaries in northwest Europe. Morecambe Bay forms at the mouth of 5 rivers, covering a staggering 310 square kilometres, 192 square miles. Estuary mud teems with life and is a vital resource for our native and wintering birds. During the winter, over 1/3 of birds can be present in the Wash. Almost all of the world's 200 chalk rivers are found in the UK. Rivers like the Itchen and Avon, which are home to some of our most iconic wildlife and are rich in invertebrate life. As these rivers make their way to the sea, they create some of the most picturesque British countryside landscapes and are believed to be the birthplace of fly fishing. Now, the UK has such a wealth of rivers and waterways. We'd like you to share your images and stories with us using social media and the hashtag #MyWilderness.
I'm constantly amazed at the quality of photographs that people are getting these days with their smartphones. But if you want to get something a little bit fancier and you buy a river, think about shutter speed. If you use a really fast one, you can sort of capture the sharpness of the water at the moment in time. But if you use a slow one, then you can get that sort of almost ghostly, ethereal, flowing quality of water.
This river is especially photogenic, but actually all rivers are really. And I think one of my favourites to take photos of is the River Wye, because you get such a variety of landscapes. It meanders its way through Wales and England. And of course, as an added bonus, it's one of the best places south of Scotland to spot a very special animal.
The River Wye winds through the Welsh and English countryside. And thanks to its unspoilt rural location, its wild waters are a haven for wildlife.
There's always something to see when you hang out on the riverbank. They just seem to attract life.
Kingfishers, water voles, dragonflies and otters all call the Wye home. But the animal that the River Wye is most famous for is the Atlantic salmon. Now it's also known as the king of fish, and there's a good reason why. Adult salmon are big fish and amazing athletes. After years spent at sea, feeding off the coast of Norway and Greenland, they travel thousands of miles back to the UK, to the very river in which they grew up, using their inbuilt map and compass. Their spawning grounds on the River Wye are 130 miles, 208 kilometres inland, but they don't make that journey all in one go. This section of the river is about 90 miles from the sea, and you'll often find that salmon will take a break and rest up in deep pools just like this one. The salmon wait here until the time is right for the final leg of their journey. I want to follow the route the salmon will take in a few months' time, when autumn comes and rain swells the Wye. That's when they can make their final sprint, climbing over 300 metres into the Welsh mountains.
It's hard to imagine how they manage to overcome rapids like these. They can leap well higher than me. What always amazes me is the fact that they have such energy left at the end of their long journey. They won't have eaten for the entire time they spent on this river. They're doing all this on an empty stomach. It's extraordinary what they can achieve when you think they're using their very last reserves of energy.
It's an incredible feat, and not all of the salmon make it.
I'm now in the very upper stretches of the River Wye, in one of the many little tributaries that feeds into the main channel itself. And this is where the salmon come to complete their journey.
It's here they will spawn the next generation of fantastic swimmers. The resulting numbers of baby salmon in the Wye are an indication of the health of the river. So I'm joining Stephen Marsh-Smith and Hayden Probert from the Wye and Dusk Foundation. They're using the latest technology to catch and count young salmon. An electric current briefly stuns the fish so they can be caught without harming them.
Electrocuting fish, it sounds sort of pretty dramatic, but they recover very quickly, don't they?
Yeah, as soon as they're out of the current, the fish will be fine. The small fish recover a lot quicker. Oh, is that one? Yeah.
Oh, nice. Oh, there we go. Oh, 3 of them.
He has two.
So how old will these guys be?
Just a couple of months.
Is that all?
Yeah.
Wow. And so basically these surveys are going to tell you how the population of young salmon are doing over time. And how are they doing?
Well, rather better than they were when we started, I'm very pleased to say.
And why is that? Why are there more here now than there were a few years ago?
Well, in this part of the river, we've sorted out acid rain, or the effects of it, adding limestone sand at all the little tributaries that run into it. And that's brought back the invertebrate life, and it's brought back the fish life, including the salmon.
Okay, that's the timer. Turn that off. And see what we got.
Not a bad little haul, is it?
Very nice.
The team record the survey results. And very soon, the young fish are free again to enjoy the clean waters of the River Wye.
Nice to see these little guys back in the river again where they belong. And you know, in the next year or two, a little switch is going to go off in their brains that's going to tell them to swim downstream to the sea. But the fact that these animals can get from here and all the way down the river and out to Greenland and back again is somehow very reassuring that Britain is still wild.
The journey taken by those little salmon parr really is astonishing.
It always amazes me how they make the way out to the river, to the feeding grounds and get back to the river of their birth. But at least people here are improving the water quality and things are looking good for them. And that's important because the River Wye salmon are actually a unique population.
So there are different populations in each river all around the UK.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you might think you have to go to really remote places in order to see the salmon leaping up waterfalls, but actually you don't. On the River Severn in Shrewsbury, the man-made weir is a great place to see them leaping, and it's proving to be quite an attraction.
Salmon are a big draw for wildlife watchers, anglers and photographers right here in the UK. But they're also the reason for all that activity in Alaska right now. The return of the Pacific salmon heralds a real wildlife spectacle. And when that happens, you can be assured that wildlife film crews are not far behind.
The salmon also attract large predators like the salmon shark. And this was an opportunity for Wild Alaska Live's Steve Backshall to get close to a shark he's never seen before. But just how did Steve and the team set about their challenge?
This is going to be home for the next 6 days or so. We're surrounded by the chilly waters of Prince William Sound. There's always something going on out here, loads of sea otters and seals and sea lions. So yeah, it's a really exciting place to be.
Steve and the crew are eager to get going whilst the weather is on their side. So they load the gear into the boat and head out to find the sharks. They're looking for a telltale sign of the shark's dorsal fin breaking the surface of the water, and they need to keep their eyes peeled.
Wow, look at this, look at this. Amazing. Look, it's there, just right there. Just banked away at the last second, and it's dived.
To stand a chance of being in the water with the sharks, they need to stick around, and shark expert Boone Hodgkin has developed a harmless technique to keep the sharks close by offering them a treat.
We'll throw some floaters and see if she'll take that, and then we'll get you in the water.
Sadly, this shark isn't interested, unlike some of the bird life around here.
No action, you know, that's what it is. It's hit or miss, so we got to find a player.
The crew head along the coast, and it's not long before they find another shark.
Check that out. That is amazing.
And the plan is put into action again.
Come on, girl. You got to aim it just right, because you want it to sink right in front of her.
Yeah, she's coming around, look. She's about to broadside right alongside us. Look at that dorsal fin.
See if she takes it.
Come on.
But once again, there are no takers. And as the weather turns, the crew have no choice than to head back to base.
I don't think I've ever tried to film an animal where the conditions have to be so precise and so perfect as they do here. We were out for maybe, I guess, 6 or 7 hours this morning, and then the wind got up just a tiny little bit, and that was too much for us to see any shark fins, and we've been basically sat around waiting for the last 7 hours. It's now 8 o'clock at night, and we're just going back out again, and who knows what will happen. But for now, it's mirror flat, calm, perfect. Fingers crossed.
With the weather back on their side, it's not long before the crew have another shark in their sights. And it's time for cameraman Mark and Steve to get in amongst them. But despite appearances from above the surface, the underwater team are facing a real problem. They just can't get close enough to see the shark through the gloom.
Oh, seriously? I could see her dorsal fin at the surface. She can't have been more than 1.5 meters away from me. But still couldn't film her. Still didn't see her on camera. Amazing.
Back at camp, director Charlie Bingham reviews the underwater footage.
It's really frustrating because the sharks are there. We're seeing them topside, we're seeing them cutting through the surface, which is really exciting. And Steve's been getting really excited about getting in the water, but the visibility is terrible. I think we're just going to have to rethink it because the visibility is not going to change in the next day or two. But because they're so close to the surface and actually breaking the surface, I'm wondering whether our best chance might actually be to get shots from the top. And we do have a drone crew with us, so I think that's probably our best bet.
And as the drone is deployed the next day, it becomes apparent that Charlie's hunch was spot on, and the team finally capture the remarkable images they were after. The crew may have been thwarted in their underwater quest, but from up high, the beauty of this special Alaskan predator is revealed.
It just goes to show, doesn't it, that not everything in wildlife filmmaking goes according to plan.
It rarely does.
No, no. And he got so close, didn't he? But he just couldn't see that shark underwater. Well, we've got more from the Wild Alaska Live team this Wednesday at 8 p.m. And, of course, you can catch up with what they're doing all this week online and via social media.
Now, those Pacific salmon that the sharks were feeding on and our own Atlantic salmon travel vast distance back to the rivers of their birth. But they're not the only long-distance migrant that travel a long way back to the UK every year. And in 2014, the One Show's Mike Dilger went to the Norfolk Broads for an unusual encounter with a very familiar long-distance migrant.
The Norfolk Broads are one of the UK's most important wetlands and are the setting of some of the boating adventures in the Swallows and Amazons books by Arthur Ransom.
But 80 years after those books were published, I've come here to find some real-life swallows that have been doing a little boating of their own.
Ross Wall has owned the Lady Anne, a traditional wooden Broads boat, for nearly 10 years. It's used as a tour boat, taking visitors to spot wildlife in these magical waterways.
But for the last couple of summers, people haven't just been watching wildlife from the boat, they've been watching wildlife on the boat.
A family of swallows have taken up residence on board.
Just put your head round the corner here, and if you look through this little gap here, you'll see the nest.
There's a mud nest just stuck to the wall here, and I can see beaks poking out. Can I have a look around the side?
Help yourself.
Oh, that is fabulous. 1, 2, 3 chicks. I can see all their bills. That is remarkable.
Fantastic,
Ross.
isn't it? I worried like anything about having them actually nesting on board and thought this is not a very wise place for them to be. As it turns out, they knew best. Last year, we had 2 broods successfully raised from that very nest. And this pair of swallows came along about the 3rd week in May. Oh, they're feeding.
I just heard a little buzz, 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 which means one of the adults must have whizzed straight in. Yep. Feed me, feed me.
And the lucky one gets it.
A swallow uses its tail as a rudder, moving it up, down and side to side to allow the bird to make precision movements in the air.
It's fantastic, isn't it?
You might think having nesting birds on board would be bad for business, and the Lady Anne would have to be moored until the chicks are fledged. But these parents go where the nest goes. Swallows are fast flyers capable of flapping their wings 14 times a second in bursts of speed.
There they are, just past the boat there.
Oh, lovely, look at that.
Ross, here we are, 400 or 500 metres away from where you moor the boat. And the birds are whizzing round, feeding, and just popping straight into the nest.
Yeah.
I've never seen it. That's amazing.
Their streamlined body shape and wings make them very efficient flying machines.
And when you think about it, it's perfect habitat. All manner of aquatic insects emerging, mayflies, damselflies, stoneflies.
A swallow chick's weight will increase tenfold in the first 10 days of its life.
The parents will catch around 6,000 insects, hoovering them out of the sky to feed their chicks in just one day.
Keeping track of the boat is quite a feat, but then these birds are built to travel.
And, you know, this is a species that has fabulous eyesight, uses visual markers to go all the way from southern Africa to the UK. So I suppose finding your boat in the mere is no problem.
No, you think at first, how do they find you? How do they put up with this moving target? Well, yeah, as you've just said, they come from Africa. They manage that quite well without someone holding their hand. They're quite capable of finding me, whether I'm here, a mile that way, a mile the other way. They're cool with it.
Absolutely wonderful. Here they come. Look at that, straight in. It's a mobile home, they're not bothered.
And the swallows do benefit from life on a houseboat.
They're constantly working different areas and resources that are full of insects.
Precisely.
And you are a protector as well.
I am a protector. Any predators come anywhere near this boat during the daytime when I'm operating, and Uncle Ross will sort them out.
Ross's little hitchhikers are a hit with the tourists too. These are wildlife tours with a twist.
I've seen some birds nesting in wacky places, but this location has to take the biscuit. I think they should change the name of this boat from the Lady Anne to the Swallow of the Norfolk Broads.
Those swallows came back to Rob's boat every year until 2016, but sadly, not this year.
Now, of course, the Norfolk Broads are a really important wetland area, and they're big, 300 square kilometres of interconnected waterways and lakes that are known as Broads.
They may look natural, but the Broads are actually flooded peat workings dug in the Middle Ages to provide fuel for the nearby towns of Norwich and Great Yarmouth.
Now, of course, the landscape of the Norfolk Broads was once very different, as was all across the UK, and was home to very different animals as a result. Now some of those long-lost beasts are actually making a return, aren't they, Colin?
They are, and one of the animals that was once found right across the UK in rivers just like this one was the European beaver. But sadly, by the 16th century, they'd become extinct.
A trial reintroduction programme has been running in Scotland since 2009, but reports of beaver living wild on the River Otter in Devon date back to 2007.
Now, nobody knows where these beavers came from, but if there was any chance for them to be allowed staying in the wild, the Devon Wildlife Trust had to find out more about them.
In 2015, the beavers were captured from the wild and brought to a makeshift veterinary centre where experts conducted health checks.
There are actually two species of beaver, the European beaver once native to the UK and the North American beaver, and on the surface they look identical.
For the Devon beavers to remain living in the wild, the Wildlife Trust had to first prove they were both disease-free and pure European beavers.
The results were positive, and so the Trust were able to re-release the animals back onto the River Otter, close to where they were originally captured.
After the beavers had been released, Martin Hughes Games from Springwatch travelled to the River Otter to find out just what kind of an impact the release of these animals can have on our wild spaces.
Beavers were once native to Britain, but their return now is controversial because of their ability to dramatically alter the landscape by building dams and lodges. Because they've been absent from England for so long, no one knows what their return will involve or how much effect they will have on the landscape in and around our river systems. So in 2011, the Devon Beaver Project was set up to assess their impact.
Everywhere you look, there are...
Mark Elliott is the project manager, and he showed me round.
So Mark, what was it like before the beavers came?
Well, it was an awful lot drier. There was just this little tiny stream running through the site,
You can just about make out the old channel there.
What, this is the actual channel here?
Yeah, that was it. But there was no other standing water on the site at all. So all of the open water that we see here now is all generated by the beavers, like this.
That's a bit of a transformation, isn't it?
There's about 250 square metres of water in some of these biggest ponds. I mean, you can see the level of the dam now. It's about 1.5 metres, 2 metres high.
How many beavers does it take to do this? I mean, dozens.
So we've only got 4 in here at the moment.
4 beavers did this? Yeah. It's all infilled with mud, presumably.
It's almost the mud that they start off with, and then they add additional sticks for support. So they're dredging the mud from the pond. You see them surging forward,
right,
push this mud up onto the top of the dam, and then they'll add sticks to that. I mean, it's remarkable, really. We've got now about 600 cubic metres of water standing in these ponds on the site.
So once they got their teeth in, there was no stopping them?
No, that's right. They really went for it.
One potential benefit of the creation of these pools is that heavy rainfall is retained and released slowly, helping to reduce flooding further downstream.
We're seeing all sorts of impacts here. They're not called a keystone species for nothing. Come and have a look at this.
Ooh, tantalising.
Some of the changes were expected, but one in particular was dramatic and surprising.
So one of the things that's done really well is common frogs. And this is a huge area of frog spawn here, look.
Is it? Oh, look at that, they've all hatched out.
So they're all just hatched.
Wow.
So there's thousands and thousands of them here.
When you get your eye in, they're everywhere, aren't they?
This is all
It's
one big
them.
area of them. I mean, we counted 521 clumps across the site this year, and that compares to only 10 in the first year when we put the beavers in, yeah. So, I mean, there was nowhere for them to breed. There was just no standing water at all. So since the beavers have come, they've created all of these amazing ponds, and the frogs are just absolutely loving it. So numbers have just come up and up and up.
And I suppose tadpoles, frogs, bottom of the food chain, other wildlife will be benefiting from this.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Things like herons, we're seeing a lot of herons here now because they're feeding on the frogs. Grass snakes, you know, you'd expect to see an increase in grass snakes because, again, they're feeding on the frogs. They're just a really important part of the food chain.
It seems to me, though, that everything seems to be positive. Everything seems to be benefiting from what the beavers are doing. I mean, are there any downsides?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, there's always going to be a mixed picture. There's going to be some things that benefit and some things that don't do quite so well. One of the concerns that's raised by salmon fishermen particularly is about fish migration. They struggle to get up over the dams into the headwaters where they breed. And that's what does happen in some cases. If you've got a series of dams in the way as the salmon migrate upstream to their spawning gravels, then those dams prevent access to the upper tributaries. But those impacts will vary a lot between catchment to catchment.
Although not everyone welcomes the return of these keystone engineers, they're now living wild on the River Otter, at least for a trial period. But it will take several years of monitoring before the full impact of their return to English waterways is fully understood.
Now, you always have to be careful with any of these animal reintroductions, but I, for one, think it is just great that one day both the beaver and the habitats that they create could once again be a common sight across the UK countryside.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that a lot of these animals that are being considered for rewilding here in the UK are actually species that you find in Alaska, which just goes to show we're not as different as you might think.
The UK was once home to not only beaver, but also the lynx, the wolf, and even the Eurasian brown bear.
Now, of course, reintroducing any animal back into the wild is a seriously complicated business, but we've had some huge successes here in the UK, haven't we?
We sure have.
And we're going to be bringing you one of those stories, that of the sea eagle, later this week.
But we don't just want to show you the UK's wildlife and wild places in the comfort of your own living room. We are really hoping that we can encourage you to get out and immerse yourself in nature and maybe have your very own wild river experience.
Now, many of you already do, but if you need a little bit of extra inspiration, then here's our guide to where the wild things are.
Wherever you are in the UK, there will be a river not too far away, a place for you to escape into the wild. If waterfalls are your thing, head for the hills year-round. Raging autumn torrents where salmon leap, or gentle trickling streams in summer. In Wales, the 4 waterfalls walk in the Brecon Beacons is a favourite. Dippers are a classic river bird. Found along fast-flowing streams, they hunt for invertebrates and nest under bridges in many of our rivers. They can be spotted across much of the UK, but mainly in the west and the north. A great place to see both adults and fledglings is the Peak District National Park in summer. If it's mammals you're after, then the water vole is one of the cutest. These semi-aquatic rodents consume an incredible 80% of their body weight each day, so need densely vegetated riverbanks. Special places to try and spot them include the wetlands of Magor Marsh in Gwent and the mill ponds of Cheddar Gorge in Somerset. If you want to see a river otter, the best plan is to head out at dawn or dusk. These elusive animals are most common in Wales, southwest England, Scotland and Northern Ireland.
Rivers have played a vital role in the development of many nations, and almost all of the world's capital cities have a significant river flowing through them.
In the 16th and 17th centuries, as industry began to expand, waterways were seen as the most reliable way of moving around raw materials, and big rivers like the Thames had navigation improvements.
The onset of the Industrial Revolution in the mid-18th century saw the construction of a vast network of canals.
And it may not have been the original intention, but these man-made rivers have now become valuable wild spaces.
As Lucy discovered when she headed to the old industrial heart of England.
This leafy green bywater is the Staffordshire and Worcestershire Canal, just west of Birmingham.
Chugging along slowly on a barge is a great way to appreciate it.
When this canal was built in 1771, it joined the Staffordshire potteries to Stourport and then to Bristol, and it also connected the Black Country to Liverpool.
In those days, it was the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and this waterway would have been busy with barges carrying coal and iron back and forth.
Since 1978, this has been a conservation area, and it now provides over 47 miles, 75 kilometres of habitat.
Hello, Paul!
Paul Wilkinson is an ecologist who's dedicated to making the canals of the West Midlands a haven for wildlife. Thanks to Paul, an army of volunteers and some natural ingenuity, wildlife like kingfishers, water voles and even otters have returned in numbers.
We're just coming up to the artificial kingfisher nesting site, just on this corner. They put the little perch in. It's actually been in about 8 years now. We've suffered a little bit of erosion.
It's a beautiful spot, isn't it?
Yeah.
If I was a kingfisher, I'd definitely be hanging out on that perch.
It's a complete contrast to how it would have been. This would have been an industrial, hard place, no space for wildlife. You know, this is the original rewilding package.
The Trust do a lot of maintenance and monitoring on the canals, and Paul's putting me to work, taking samples of the local water life.
This is the bottom of the food chain in a way, isn't it? That
Yeah,
supports all the kingfishers and the otters and the showy animals, is these creepy crawlies in the water.
There's kingfisher.
How fantastic! I love kingfishers. I cannot believe we've been that lucky.
Beautiful.
Of all the animals that benefit from healthy canals and rivers, Paul's most proud of the work that's been done to encourage and grow the bat population. The installation of dozens of bat boxes along the banks of the canal has been a big success. And Paul's taking me along one of his regular monitoring projects. If I'm lucky, Paul's special licence to handle bats may give me a close-up encounter.
Yeah, we got a bat.
Yes! Fantastic! What a score! Wow, look at that.
That was a soprano pipistrelle.
When they flutter around you, because of the wings being out, you just get this idea that they're much bigger than they are.
The soprano pipistrelle's by far the commonest bat we get along the waterways in our bat boxes. So these are actually indicators of good woodlands, of good water quality, because of the diet they need, the amount of insects and aquatic insects in particular, because it takes so much energy to fly and it takes so much energy for a little body to get warm. They need lots of good quality food.
And that food is found in great abundance around here. So to witness just what an excellent location this canal has now become for bats, Paul's brought me back after dark when the bats take to the wing. We've brought bat detectors to tune into their wavelengths.
Bats make a high frequency sound, and this is converting that sound into a lower frequency so that we can actually hear it.
Yep, their calls are much higher than we can hear.
This is entrance into a secret world, isn't it, really?
Well, if you turn them off,
yeah.
Who would know there was bats here?
You'd never know, would you?
No.
You would never know.
No.
And suddenly they're revealed. So why are canals a particularly good area for bats?
You've got the water, so straight away you've got the insects that are emerging from the water, but also you've got the drinking. So especially females, every night, that's their first call, is to have a drink of water, and it's nice and calm water rather than fast rushing streams which can often catch them out. And more importantly, there's hardly any light pollution whatsoever on a canal like this. Some people find them scary. The fact is they're fascinating. There's so much we can learn from them. But the more and more we start to study them, we make them less cryptic.
You've got to love any animal that eats midges and mosquitoes, haven't
Exactly.
you?
And, you know, in large numbers. They are out there every night consuming harmful insects, and they don't want a salary.
A lot of people don't really like bats, but it's worth knowing that each one of those pipistrelles can hoover up 3,000 flying insects in a single night. And as someone who's just been savaged by midges here in Scotland for the last few days, I say bring on the pipistrelles, we love you.
I couldn't agree with you more, Lucy. They are a bit of a disaster around here sometimes. But you know, we've got 18 different species of bats in the UK, and the biggest one, the noctule, could fit in the palm of my hand. They feed only on insects, and many of them emerge from the water itself. Using state-of-the-art thermal imaging cameras, teams from the BBC Natural History Unit were able to capture this amazing scene of a variety of different bat species, all feeding on emerging insects over a lake in late spring.
Now, all of these insects, of course, are a great indicator of the cleanliness of our water, which, when healthy, can support a really surprising variety of life.
And now there's a very strange creature that lurks in our rivers that few of us may ever have seen or heard of. And in 2015, the One Show's Miranda Kristofnikov went in search of them.
Morning on the River Froome. Who would guess that under these quiet waters lurks a beast from prehistoric times?
Imagine turning the clock back 400 million years to a time before woolly mammoths, even before the dinosaurs. It's hard to believe a creature that lived then still exists here in the UK today.
I'm in Dorset to find one of the oldest, rarest and frankly scariest animals in Britain. My guide is Bournemouth University fishery scientist Adrian Pinder, who's promised me a close encounter with an ancient alien, the sea lamprey.
So we're looking for sea lampreys, but yet we're looking for them in a freshwater river habitat. How exactly does that work?
Well, sea lamprey spawn in freshwater and then spend a portion of their adult life at sea before then coming back up the river to spawn again.
At sea, sea lamprey are truly gruesome parasites that attach themselves by their sucker mouths to fish and grind away the flesh of their host. By contrast, on their return to fresh water, those mouth parts are used to construct their nests.
Well, if we take a look at the gravel in front of us down here, you can see that there's a thin layer of algae all over it. But when the adult lamprey come upstream, what they do is they start moving stones around, so they're turning them over to create their nests.
Okay.
So we're looking for big patches of clean gravel, really.
Sea lamprey swim into UK rivers to breed, where they need shallow, fast-flowing waters to reach at least 15 degrees centigrade in order to spawn. So with a bit of luck, I'm hoping to see them in action.
There's a couple of patches up there that look a bit cleaner.
You just found your first sea lamprey nest.
Oh, fantastic.
Well, I suggest we get kitted up and go and take a closer look.
OK, amazing.
Male sea lamprey exude pheromones into the water to attract females. Then, together, they prepare nests in the gravel for spawning.
Now, in order to see this behaviour, I've brought along this specially adapted box with a perspex bottom, and if I put this on the water, I should be able to see through the reflections. We're not going to disturb them, are we?
Well, these fish have only got one thing on their mind at the moment. They're going to die after this, so they're investing all their energy now into reproduction.
Oh, I can see it, it's there. That is incredible.
Let's take a closer look.
That's just amazing. They're enormous. And they're moving the stones. They got hold of a stone.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's how they're constructing the nest. They're using their sucker disc to actually pick up these stones and reposition them around this nest to create a crater. And in doing so, that exposes some finer sediment in the middle of the pit where they can then lay their eggs. They will typically leave a big stone in the middle of the nest that they use as an anchor stone. The stone just needs to be sufficiently heavy so that when they attach to one another and spawn, this flow doesn't displace them and wash them out of the nest. This one's spawning now, OK? Sorry to stop you there.
Hang on. Oh, my word. So there was a rapid tail wiggle going on.
And the male will have wrapped his tail around the back end of the female there. She'll have drilled into the sediments and deposited the eggs just subsurface of that gravel.
Wow.
And we should see a cooing event now. Look at this.
Look at it go, look at it go.
That is fantastic.
They are quite bizarre-looking fish, aren't they? They're very prehistoric.
I used to think they were quite horrendous creatures, to be quite honest, and that's until I started filming them and realised how beautiful they are. What I really love about them is the fact that the males and females will work cooperatively, moving stones from the nest to the perimeter of the nest.
There's no denying that these underwater oddities have evolved to stand the test of time. Even though these sea lampreys are about to reach the end of their life cycle, they have completed that essential task of producing the next generation.
The lamprey may have a face that only a mother could love, but I love them for their weirdness. And of course, the UK is one of the key countries in Europe now for the sea lamprey.
Absolutely. Very important that we look after them. And I try to go snorkeling with them every summer. Every time since I first saw them, I have to say I fell in love with them. And I suppose because any creature that's been around for hundreds of millions of years deserves respect.
Yeah, you've got to respect the lamprey. Tomorrow on Wild UK, we turn our attention to forests and the wildlife that makes our wooded wildernesses their home.
Lucy discovers a project that's helping turn the success of the pine marten in Scotland into something the whole UK can share.
Colin journeys deep into Kielder Forest.
And well, if you go into the woods, you're sure of a big surprise. We go behind the scenes with the Wild Alaska Bear team.
Be this close to a grizzly.
You can keep up with the latest news from the Wild Alaska Live team all this week online.
And join us again tomorrow morning, 9:15, BBC One, for more Wild UK.
Yes, more tomorrow and